welcome to the premiere episode of Buddhism for Today. In this episode, we are going to cook up a recipe for happiness by introducing you to the practice of Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism. The essence of this practice is Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, pronounced Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. This is my cup of coffee in the morning. This is what I do every morning to get me going. Maybe you have your own way of getting up in the morning. You could be drinking a cup of coffee or doing yoga or a cup of tea or whatever your routine is. But for me, it's chanting Daimoku, or the continuous repetition of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. At my house, I have a Buddhist altar, and I also have a Gohonzon, which is the honorific scroll that we chant in front of. We meaning SGI members or practitioners of Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism. So what do the words Nam Myoho Renge Kyo mean? Nam Myoho Renge Kyo literally means devotion to the mystic law of cause and effect through sound or teaching of a Buddha. The word Nam derives from Sanskrit. A close translation of its meaning is to devote oneself. So Nam literally means devotion. Myoho. Myoho literally means the mystic law. Myo refers to the very essence of life, which is invisible and beyond intellectual understanding, while Ho means law. So Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, or Myoho Renge Kyo, means the mystic law of cause and effect inherent in the universe. Renge. Renge means lotus flower. The lotus blooms and produces seeds at the same time, and also represents the simultaneous aspect of cause and effect. The circumstances of our lives are determined by the causes and effects, both good and bad, that we accumulate through our thoughts, words, and actions at any given moment. This is called our karma. The lotus flower is a beautiful flower that grows in a muddy swamp. And this is kind of a metaphor for our inherent Buddha nature that all human beings have. All human beings have something called a Buddha nature, or a potential for enlightenment. And the metaphor then correlates to human beings that have maybe, are defiled, our nature is covered up with karma. But when we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, we can manifest our Buddha nature and our potential for happiness. Kyo. Kyo literally means sutra, or the voice or teaching of a Buddha. In this sense, it also means sound, rhythm, or vibration. So what would be a recipe for a happy life? There are three basics in applying Buddhism to our daily lives: faith, practice, and study. They are the primary ingredients in the recipe for revealing our innate enlightened condition or Buddhahood. Through chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, studying Buddhism, and taking action daily for the sake of society, we can establish a sense of happiness and wisdom, and also contribute to society. So how do we define faith, practice, and study in Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism? Faith is defined as an expectation that something good will happen in your life or your circumstances will improve for the better. The practice consists of chanting Daimoku, or the repetition of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and reciting the Hoben and Jigage chapters in the Lotus Sutra, which are the two highest chapters in the Lotus Sutra, the two essential chapters. This is called Gongyo, which literally means assiduous practice. There's practice for yourself and practice for others, or telling people about the benefits of chanting. This is called Shakabuku. Study. There are many study materials in the SGI, including the weekly newspaper, the World Tribune, the monthly study magazine Living Buddhism, and the collective writings of Nichiren Daishonin, known as the Gosho, which in Japanese means honorific writing. I was introduced to this practice of Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism by attending a Soka Gakkai International meeting, or SGI meeting. The Soka Gakkai International is an international Buddhist network that actively promotes peace, culture, and education through personal change and social contribution. The Soka Gakkai International, or SGI, is a Buddhist association with more than 12 million members in 190 countries and territories worldwide, with headquarters based in Tokyo, Japan. SGI members practice the teachings of Nichiren Daishonin, a Buddhist monk who lived in 13th century Japan. The first president of the Soka Gakkai was a Japanese educator in the 1930s known as Tsunase Saburo Makiguchi. The second president of the Soka Gakkai was Josei Toda, a Japanese educator who died in prison during the Second World War for opposing the policies and practices of the Japanese military and government. The third and current president of the Soka Gakkai International is Daisaku Ikeda, who was mentored by Josei Toda, and Josei Toda in turn was mentored by Mr. Makiguchi. Soka Gakkai, or Soka Gakkai literally means value creating society. The core philosophy of the SGI can be summed up by the concept of human revolution, which is kind of a modern day term for enlightenment. SGI members practice in over 190 countries and territories worldwide. The SGI engages in different activities worldwide, such as cultural exchange. The SGI believes that cultural exchange is an ideal way to develop ties of friendship between different cultures and nationalities. Another activity that the SGI engages in is in human rights. SGI's activities to promote awareness of human rights focus on respect for the equality and dignity of all people, in that sense that all people have the Buddha nature, so all people are worthy of respect. SGI is also an active participant in interfaith dialogues and events. Also, sustainable development. SGI is actively involved in promoting sustainable development through educational campaigns and practical measures such as recycling and tree planting projects worldwide. What exactly is a Buddha? Perhaps your idea of a Buddha is someone who has a shaved head, or someone running around in robes, or someone begging for alms or whatnot. Okay, actually, in Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism, Buddhism means someone who is enlightened to the law of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. 2,500 years ago, Shakyamuni Buddha became enlightened under the Bodhi tree in India. As you can see by the map, Buddhism then spread via two streams throughout Asia. So Southeast Asia then spreading from India to Khmer, as you can see on the map, through Vietnam, to Thailand, to Sri Vijaya or in Indonesia. And then we have the Mahayana stream, which spread from India to China, to Korea, and then Japan. So as you can see by the map, Buddhism spread from India to China to Japan. And in Japan then, the 13th century monk Nichiren Daishonin, after undergoing a rigorous and extensive study of all the Buddhist texts throughout different religious centers in Japan, determined that Nam-myoho Renge Kyo was the essence of the Buddhist teachings, and Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is the title of the Lotus Sutra. And so today I would like to introduce you to the life of Nichiren Daishonin. Nichiren was born on February 16th this month in 1222 in the village of Kominato, which is on the eastern coast of Japan. So at the age of 12, Zen Nichimaro, which was Nichiren's childhood name, or some sources say at 16, began his study of Buddhism at Seichoji Temple, which is located in Kominato. And you can see that there's a 1,000-year-old tree. I took this picture when I was there. And he wanted to resolve the mysteries of life and death, and especially the conflicts that had arisen between the competing schools of Buddhism at that time. So Nichiren then embarked on a formal study of Buddhism at the religious centers throughout Japan. He went to Kamakura, you can see in this photo. He traveled to Mount Hei in Kyoto. He traveled to all these religious centers to master the doctrines of Buddhism. These many years of meditation study led him to realize that the essence of Buddhism was contained in the Lotus Sutra, and that the essence of the Lotus Sutra and the title of the Lotus Sutra is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. So Nichiren traveled to Kamakura, he traveled to Mount Hei in Kyoto, and you can see these photos here. When I was there, I went inside the temple grounds and I saw different portraits of the different Buddhist masters. And we have a portrait of Tiantai, of Nichiren, of Dengyo, and all of these teachers contributed to the Buddha's teachings, to classifying the Buddha's teachings, and helping us understand the Lotus Sutra. And so after he had studied the different teachings of Zen and Shingon and Jodo Shinshu, he realized that these were preached by Shakyamuni Buddha only in preparation for the final teaching of the Lotus Sutra. So after Nichiren had traveled to Kamakura, to Mount Hei, and different centers, religious centers in Japan, he returned back to Mount Seichoji, Seichoji Temple, and he established true Buddhism by chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo on April 28th, 1253 in the morning there. And he was not well received because the other priests of the local temples were not happy with this declaration of true Buddhism, because they were already established. The sects of Zen, Shingon, and Jodo Shinshu were very well established in society. So after that initial declaration, he then traveled back to Kamakura and began propagating his philosophy of Buddhism. And again, he was not well received at all. And he was subject to different attacks by the local authorities and the government. His attacks on the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings outraged the local authorities and the patrons of the other well-established sects. And that year in Japan, 1256, saw different calamities in nature, drought and earthquakes and whatnot. And so Nichiren tried to explain then and understood that the principle of oneness and you and your environment are one. And so he understood that because of the people's life condition, these calamities and natures were manifesting and occurring. So on July 16th, 1260, after Nichiren had been observing these different calamities in the environment, drought, famine, earthquakes, and whatnot, he was very concerned about this. And so on July 16th, 1260, he presented to the region of Japan a treatise called the Risho on Kokoron, which translates into on securing the peace of the land through the propagation of true Buddhism. And this treatise was basically ignored by the ruling region at the time, and really incited a reaction from the well-established Zen sects, Zen, Shingon, and Jodo Shinshu sects of that time. In that treatise, he talked about, he gave different warnings that further calamities would occur, and as well as foreign invasion. The ruling government at that time did not take well to this at all, and actually persecuted Nichiren Daishonin, which led to a series of persecutions, and the first persecution is called the Izu exile. And so Nichiren was actually banished to the Izu Peninsula in Japan, and was living a rather austere life there for a few years. So in 1263, Nichiren was pardoned from his exile on Izu, and he returned to Kamakura. And so he continued to propagate, true Buddhism, and tried to work with the local authorities and the regent to tell them that, there was a possibility of foreign invasion and more calamities to come. And what happened is that during the course of this time, Ryokan, who was a very prominent priest at that time, worked with the local authorities on trumped-up charges, and to make a long story short, they had him arrested again, and this time they were planning on executing him. And so the authorities took him to Enoshima Island, and to a place called Tatsunokuchi, which means mouth of the dragon, and they're going to have him beheaded. But at the exact moment that he's about to be beheaded, an object appeared in the sky, and they think now is either a meteor or a comet, and blinded the whole sky. And at that time, the executioners were so terrified of what had happened that they called off the whole execution. And instead, Nichiren was banished to, again, his another exile was banished to Sado Island. Okay, so Sado Island is an island off the western coast of Japan. And in the winter, it's incredibly cold with tons of snow and ice. And poor Nichiren at that time was banished there. And at that time, the islands of Sado was well known for exiles, place of exile. So the Emperor Juntoku, as well as Zeame, who was the founder of No Theater in Japan, were all banished there and sent into exile. And so he had to leave this. He had to live a very, very harsh existence, living in a shack with depilated corpses, and only his faithful follower of Nico Shonin were sent to live there for a few years. And so this was another one of his persecutions by the government. So when Nichiren was living on Sado Island under the incredibly harsh conditions, snow and ice, and in this depilated shack with corpses and the worst possible conditions you can imagine, he wrote different treatises, and one of them was called The Opening of the Eyes. And he was able to survive and also gain local support among the local people there. And during that time, one of his early predictions of internal strife within the government actually came true. And so, he was actually pardoned then from his exile on Sado Island and returned to Kamakura. So Nichiren then returned back to Kamakura from his exile on Sado Island. And at that time, the ruling regent treated him a bit more respectfully because, what he had said, his predictions, some were coming true. He again repeated his warning of foreign invasion, and though he was treated more respectfully and also given a hearing, he was not really taken that seriously. In 1274, then Nichiren, after trying to warn the government several times, then retreated to the foot of Mount Minobu. And in October of that year, I believe, his threat of foreign invasion came true with the Mongol invasion of Japan. And so what he had actually predicted had actually come true. So after being pardoned from the Sado exile, Nichiren returned back to Kamakura, and then after spending a short time there, went to Mount Minobu. And Mount Minobu became his training ground for disciples, and he continued to write there as well, amongst severe conditions because of it's very cold there in the winter, and he lived there. And in October of 1274, the prediction he had made of foreign invasion of the Mongols actually came true. So during Nichiren's time on Mount Minobu, he spent time training his disciples, propagating true Buddhism, and whatnot. And so what happened is that there was a very important event that occurred during this time. This was called the Atsuhara persecution. And at this time, it was his followers that were persecuted and not Nichiren. And again, against the local authorities who were very upset by these activities. And actually what happened is that these farmers who were propagating true Buddhism were actually beheaded. Nichiren, of course, was so moved by this that he, at that time, realized that his followers were ready then to receive the Daigohonzon, or the Gohonzon, which means honorific scroll. This is a scroll that SGI members have, everyone has in their home. And this is literally means honorific scroll. And this is a scroll that Nichiren himself inscribed, which he put his life into. And there's a quote of him saying, "My life is inscribed in Sumi here in the Gohonzon." And so he actually inscribed the Daigohonzon in 1279. So after Nichiren had inscribed the Daigohonzon in 1279, he had began to experience failing health, due to the harsh persecutions that he had endured before, and again living amidst harsh conditions on Mount Minobu. And so in 1282, he actually passed away in Ikegami, which is close to present-day Tokyo. And a few days before, he had gone to the Hitachi Hot Springs trying to recover his health, but his body simply couldn't take it. And so he passed away peacefully on 1282. And so this brings us to a conclusion to the life of Nichiren Daishonin, who is a sort of a modern-day Buddha for our age, and a man who is really seminal. He's really, really a very important man in the course of Japanese history and in the course of the entire world history as well. And so it's an honor for me to be able to recognize Nichiren in the month of February, which is when he was born. So thanks so much for tuning into our program. I hope you enjoyed this introduction to the Buddhism of Nichiren Daishonin, true Buddhism of Nichiren Daishonin, and helping us celebrate his life. He was born on February 16th, 1222. So this is the month that he was born, and a very significant month in the Soka Gakkai as well. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you. I hope that you will join us next time as well. True Buddhism does not focus on superficial externals, but instead focuses on purifying and transforming the inner world of the human being.